Good morning. I think I just reached in time. 3 hours is not sufficient actually. It would require 3 days. Yes. So you have just gone through some of the glimpses of refraction. See, refraction is important for two reasons. Refraction is something which your examiners know too well. So obviously not knowing that probably will not go very well with them. So that's the reason why you need to learn it, whether you like it or not. Number two, probably more importantly, is what you observe as a practitioner is if you do not, you are not very comfortable with refraction, then you are going to face problems because it's linked to, it's actually, it's because refraction is linked with every subspecialty as such. So not knowing that, you'll be a slave of your autorefractometers or your optometrists who probably know much less than you. So it's better that you get an idea and have the nuances of refraction ready at your fingertips so that even though you're not doing many a times yourself, that at least you have a good mastery over your clinical practice. So I think since we have a small group, let it be informal, you can probably take out your papers. It is not, I'm not going to divide you into two teams. I'm just going to run through the questions. You're going to mark your answers as 1, 2, 3, 4 is the question and ABCD is the options. And we'll come back and discuss each one of them. So this will be one way of knowing refraction in the fun way. I think I'll start. So these are the 20 questions, or 10 from basic refraction and 10 from applied refraction. And you can probably I'll give you around 15 seconds for you to answer. They're pretty simple there. And we'll go with the question 1. You can please write down your answer so that, or the option, so that you can probably know or have some kind of a self-evaluation. So we'll start with something very simple. Cournot's term is what? We'll quickly go through the questions and come back for the discussion. I think we have finished our time. We will go to question number 2. Please mark your answer. What will be the movement of retinoscopy reflex at 75 centimeters? The working distance is 75 centimeters. When the subject is around 1.5 diopters myopic, there will be no movement, there will be crisscross movement, there will be with movement, there will be against movement. Probably you need to scratch your brains a bit. At 75 centimeters, what will be the movement of the retinoscopy reflex? I think you have got it. Go to question 3. What happens when a person views a target through a prism of 5 prism diopters from a distance of 2 meters and shoots at it, So what happens? He hits the target, misses by 5 centimeters, providing he is a very good shooter, misses by 10 centimeters, and misses by 2.5 centimeters. Seeing through a prism of 5 prism diopters at 2 meters and shooting at it. I think you must have got a bullseye now. Now this is this you all feel like, Jesus Christ in the exam with this cross there. Okay, crucifixion. Okay. What is the acceptance? The working distance is 66 centimeters. And we have used atropine as the cycloplegia. So what will be the acceptance? So we have 4 options. You have to pick one. The vertical is plus 2.25 and the horizontal is minus 1.75. You can just note the option. Go to question number 5. If the near point of convergence is 8 centimeters at 8 years of age, what will be the NPC at 14 years? 4 centimeters, 12 centimeters, 14 centimeters, and none of the above. NPC at 14 years. Okay. Now 6th question. You have to transpose minus 2.75 The following is the example of curvature myopia. Myopia due to early cataract, cornea plana, myopia due to forward displacement of lens, and lenticonus. Okay, I think question number 8. One eye of a child has 1.5 diopters of latent hypermetropia and its near point of accommodation is 10 centimeters. If he accepts a minimum plus glasses of +3 to achieve 6.6, what is his total hyperopic error? Plus 13.5, plus 4.5, plus 14.5, plus 16 point, 16, 13.50, 14.5, 4.5 and 16 diopters per. So what will be his total hyperopia? I think we'll go to 9th question. The convergence error induced while using synaptophory is accommodative convergence, proximal convergence, tonic convergence and fusional convergence. So which of the convergence is an error when you are measuring on a synaptophore? Okay, 10th question. This is the last one of the basics. Example of mixed astigmatism. I think you have got 4 examples. You have to just pick one. Which is the example for a mixed astigmatism? So we move to probably more comfortable zone of applied refraction where we talk about cataract and LASIK. You will be probably more comfortable with that. A patient with a silicone oil filled eye undergoes a cataract surgery. If you put +21 as measured by the ultrasound A scan, what will be his post-op refraction? This is +4, -4, -1, or he will be emmetropic. So if you measure, biometry is done with an A scan ultrasound, and if you implant +21. We will move to the next one. The main reason for moving from astigmatic incisional procedures, like for astigmatism, to toric IOLs is, the main reason to change to toric from incisions are market pressures, cost of incisional procedures, the incision usually results in a corneal ectasia or increase in the higher order aberrations. Obviously market pressures. Question 13. The strategy for managing near vision problems after cataract surgery are accommodative lenses, trifocal lenses, monovision strategy, all the above. Unaided vision is 618. How can you explain this? There is an error in the vision recording. There is a damage to optic nerve because of high IOP due to suction ring. There is loss of magnification of a high plus lens or a diffuse lamellar keratitis. So 15, the options for significant post-op refractive surprise are piggyback IOLs, IOL exchange, bioptics, all of the above. 16, a child of 2 years with esotropia for near and straight eyes for distance, not improving with full hyperopic correction. What's your diagnosis? Accommodative spasm, refractive accommodative esotropia, non-refractive accommodative esotropia, partially accommodative esotropia. You are given the correction, the squint hasn't improved. Last 4 questions. Conductive keratoplasty involves creating a multifocal cornea in both eyes, creating a central bulge in non-dominant eye, implanting a lenticule in stroma, corneal stroma, and none of the above. The factor not considered for selecting a patient for LASIK is degree of myopia, corneal thickness, the amount of ablation needed per diopter of correction, photopic pupil size. You seem to be pretty comfortable with refractive surgery. So last 2 questions. 19, decreasing treatment zone in LASIK or PRK can help full correction in thin corneas. is not related to mesopic pupillometry, can result in corneal ectasia, all of the above. I think the last question. The possible reasons for pseudo-accommodation with monofocal IOLs are spherical aberration, small pupil causing good depth of focus, small amounts of myopic astigmatism, all of the above. I think let's check it out. So what I'll do is probably there are already two equal groups. I will probably ask the first question to this group and it will go to the next group if you don't answer. And we'll call this Dr. Santosh Honavar's group and the Dr. Rashmin Gandhi's group. Let us see. Answer this group, Dr. Santosh group. Okay, so it is basically arrangement of light rays, which is very classical, two focal lines and a circle of least confusion. So C is the answer. So that group, can anybody answer this? What will be the movement? See, just imagine, at 1 meter, it will be -1 diopter of myopia. At 2/3 meter, that is 66 centimeters, it will be 1.5. So somewhere in between, 75, somewhere in between. So it will be between 1 and 1.5. It may be 1.25. Patient is 1.25, okay. But actually the patient is 1.5 myopia, actual patient. So it will be still myopic, the eye. So it will be a against movement. Okay, but ideally you are supposed to refract as far as, technically possible, because the amount of correction, any small changes in the distance can induce a lot of error. But it is not technically possible to refract from 2 meters or 3 meters. Okay, so that's why we do it at 2/3. Why 2/3? Because it is an arm's length, so you can change the glasses. There is nothing, no other big deal. Normally 1 meter would be easy for calculation, but 2/3 is basically an arm's length. So you need to really know that it has to be 2/3 since you are correcting for 1.5. I think the question to Dr. Santosh team again. Okay, what happens? Huh? A hits the target. Oh, it has to be really great, man. So this, yes? C. C, okay. Huh? See, basically the definition of prism diopter is it shifts the image by 1 centimeter at a distance of 1 meter. Okay. So obviously, if it is 5 prism diopters, it has to shift 5 centimeters, the image at 1 meter. But you are doing it from 2 meters. So it will be 5 into 2, 10 centimeters. You got it? So the answer is C. So retinoscopy. What's the answer? I think they need a 3 hours class. Oh, no, please. Your examiner will make merry with you people. Okay, he will have a field day. See, it is 66 centimeters, so you are going to subtract 1.5. It is atropine, so you have to subtract 1. So totally you have to subtract 2.5. So choose the hyperopic meridian, which is plus 2.25. Minus 2.5 will be minus 0.25. That will be the sphere. And the cylinder is the difference between the two meridians. Don't subtract from the second meridian. You should always take one meridian, subtract the distance as well as the cycloplegia, put it there as the sphere. The difference, so this is minus 1.75, this is, so the difference is 4. The difference between the two meridia is the astigmatism by definition. So the difference is 4. So there will be a minus 4 cylinder, okay, at 90 degrees, right? So the clue is subtract from one meridian and just put the difference as the cylinder. Okay, Dr. Santosh team. What's the answer? Yeah. So in all the elections we have been putting this nota. So here, this is the near point of convergence is fixed for a person. It can't change with age. It's only the near point of accommodation which changes with age, whereas NPC is constant for a particular person and can be increased with some exercises. So question 6, transpose. So you need to do an algebraic sum of the two, minus 2.575 plus 3. It will be plus 0.25 sphere. The cylinder sign changes. So from plus to minus. And 163, what is the perpendicular axis of 163? 73. So I always tell, add the first two letters in a 3-digit number. So 1 plus 6 becomes 773. Okay? Very easy to get a perpendicular. If it's a 2-digit number, divide the first number into 1 plus the remaining number. Imagine if it is 54. 1, 4, 4. Okay, if it is 79. 1, 6, 9. The first number should be divided as 1 and the remaining number. If it is a 3-digit number, you just add the first two numbers. Okay, to get the perpendicular quickly. That will definitely impress the examiner. Question 7, curvature myopia. Lenticonus. Cornea plana results in hyperopia. So it is, so forward displacement is called as positional myopia. Early cataract is usually index myopia. So question 8 to these people. Yeah, now I think you can take some time. So this will probably, will require some kind of how to, classify hyperopia. Anybody can answer this? See, the latent hyperopia is 1.5. See, when you classify hyperopia is divided into latent, which is because of the ciliary tone, which is not clinically relevant. Only under cycloplegia it becomes relevant. Whereas the remaining is called as manifest. The manifest is divided into again facultative and absolute. The facultative which can be controlled or corrected by the facultative accommodation. Whatever is left uncorrected after fully exercising accommodation is called absolute. So here the absolute hyperopia is plus 3 because you have done a fogging, that is the minimum plus correction required for 6/6. So the absolute hyperopia is plus 3. What is the facultative hyperopia? See, the near point of accommodation is how much? 10 centimeters. So what is the amplitude of accommodation? 100 by 10. So 10 diopters is facultative hyperopia. See, please understand, by doing the NPA, we can know the hyperopic, what is the accommodative amplitude. It is just 100 by that. If 25 centimeters is your NPA, then you have 4 diopters of accommodation. If 50 centimeters is your NPA, you have 2 diopters of accommodation. Here you have 10 centimeters as NPA. So it is 100 by 10. So this child has 10 diopters of accommodation. So it has 1.5 as latent, 10 diopters as facultative, and 3 diopters as absolute. So it is 10 plus 1.5 plus 3, that is 14.5. Okay? This side. What kind of convergence is induced while using synaptophore? So you have 4 types of convergence. Accommodative convergence, which is whenever it is a synkinesis as a part of accommodation. Whenever you accommodate, the eyes converge. So that is accommodative convergence. Proximal convergence is the convergence induced by the awareness of the nearness of an object. If something comes close by, you converge. Okay? Tonic is the normal tone of medial rectus to keep the eye parallel. Otherwise, the eyes are in the orbital axis. To keep them straight, you have some normal tone which is called as tonic convergence. And the fusional convergence is the biggest of the all. It is for the ocular imbalance for the disparate images, we use a fusional convergence to keep the images together. So if you have a synaptophore close by, it induces proximal convergence. So if you are trying to check the convergence, the proximal convergence can be an error. If you are checking fusional convergence, the proximal convergence can be added as an error. So what is the example? See, normally, please understand, a mixed astigmatism will have always cylinder higher than the sphere. Otherwise, it is not a mixed astigmatism. For example, if you take B, if you transpose this, it becomes a compound hyperopic astigmatism. Always in a mixed astigmatism, the cylinder is higher than the sphere. Question 11 to this side. What will be the post of refraction? How do you explain that? So normally, if there's a silicon oil, when you do an A-scan biometry, the axial length is always overestimated because of the increased transit time. So the IOL power will always be underestimated. Okay, to a tune of, in a normal axial length eye, to the tune of around 3 to 4 diopters. So plus 21 if you are putting, okay, you are actually highly undercorrecting this patient because he requires actually around plus 25. So he will be hyperopic by 4 diopters. So his post-op refraction will be plus 4. So just remember this. For any A-scan biometry in a silicon oil eye, you have to add around 3 to 4 diopters to the IOL power that you get. So why do we move to toric lenses? Incisional procedures are costly. No, market pressures, we can't really, tell the truth here. Incision, see, basically it is because of induction of higher order aberrations. When you incise an LRI or an astigmatic keratotomy, when you cut the cornea or the limbus, you induce higher order aberration. The quality of vision comes down, but the astigmatism may get corrected, but the quality of vision and the contrast sensitivity goes down. So that's the reason why we use a lens-based procedure, not a cornea-based procedure. We have still 5 minutes? Okay. Quickly we'll go through this now. I think these are pretty simple. All the above, yeah. Now we have monovision also. Yes? Okay, so it's because it's a high plus lens, it acts like a magnifying glass. So whatever is the vision that you record in a high hyperopia is much more than the actual potential vision. In a myopia, it is reverse. In a high myope, the vision recording with glasses is much less than the potential vision. So that's why myopic LASIKs are very, very gratifying because the patient not only gets rid of glasses, he actually has a increase in the visual acuity. He is 618 with glasses, but he'll be 6'5 without glasses. Because the minification factor induced by the concave lenses is taken away. The exactly reverse happens in hyperopic LASIK. Hyperopic LASIK is prone for regression. At the same time, there is a decrease in the actual visual acuity because that plus lens magnification factor is taken away. What is this? If you have a post-op refractive surprise, you can put another lens in the sulcus. You can do an IOL exchange. You can also do a corneal refractive surgery called as a bioptics. So all are options for a refractive surprise. I think time to squint. Okay, so if the child squints are only for near, not for distance, most likely it is linked to accommodation. And there is no hyperopic error and not corrected by the glasses, means it's a non-refractive accommodative esotropia. Partially accommodative is a combination of accommodative and non-accommodative. Conductive keratoplasty means so you don't create a it's presbyLASIK, okay? Presbyopic LASIK is creating a multifocal cornea. Implanting a lenticule is totally a different thing. Creating a central bulge in the, so you do a thermal laser treatment in the non-dominant eye, do a mid-peripheral burn so that the central, okay, there's a flattening of the mid-periphery and a bulge in the center. So this is the whole basis of conductive keratoplasty. Answer is B. You create a central bulge in the non-dominant eye to improve presbyopic symptoms. Here, degree of myopia is important, corneal thickness is important, how much of corneal stoma is required to be ablated for a particular diopter of correction is also required. We don't take the photopic pupil size, we take the mesopic pupil size because When the pupil dilates, it has to be smaller than the optic zone. So a similar question in the optic zone thing or a treatment zone, what's the answer? By decreasing the treatment zone or the optic zone in LASIK, can you help full correction in thin corneas? Yes. If the cornea is thin, you can reduce the optic treatment zone. Is it related to mesopic pupillometry? Yes, it is. No, it doesn't result in corneal ectasia. So what is the answer? A. So it can help full correction in thin corneas. I think the last question. So even we have seen even monofocal patients can actually sometimes manage N10, sometimes N8. Why? Because, what is the answer here? No, it's all the above. Spherical aberrations, some of the spherical aberrations also increase the field depth of focus because they have 2-3 focal points. So you can actually, positive spherical aberrations are good for, it acts like a pseudo accommodation. The small pupil, then the depth of focus is increased because of the pinhole effect. And small amounts of myopic astigmatism actually give you a kind of good unaided intermediate vision and near vision. So all the above. I think Dr. Rashmin is here. Pupil, why it is normally, what is the normal pupil size? Around 2 to 3 millimeters? Around 3. Why it is 3? Why not it is 6 or 0.5? Why did the nature create pupil, our normal pupil, okay, normal size, I'm not talking about extreme illuminations. Normally it is around 3. Why? So if you know the physical optics, if you increase the pupillary size, there will be a huge induction of higher order aberrations. As the cornea, more of cornea and lens get exposed, there will be a multifold increase in the higher order aberrations. So if you decrease the pupil size, the spherical aberrations and the other higher order aberrations can be managed well. So you have a better vision. At the same time, if you make the pupil too small, you can get rid of aberration, but you will induce another problem of diffraction. The diffraction means the light bends at corners, it creates a lot of halo and glare. So smaller the pupil, more is the diffraction phenomena. So the larger the pupil, the diffraction is very less. If you see, at 3 millimeters, both balance each other. You have the best benefit, okay, negating both diffraction and higher order aberration exposure. So nature has made it as 3 millimeters, not too big, not too small. And the reason why, okay, you get blurred vision after dilatation of pupil. Okay, even without cycloplegia, if you just put phenylephrine, you start getting blurring because spherical aberrations are the reason for. Okay, and finally, what is night myopia? So again, in the night, there's a pupillary dilatation and higher order aberrations come into. So you basically, okay, the vision drops. And you just find out why it is called as night myopia. Why there is a myopic, okay, induction of myopia during night. This is called as night myopia. I think we'll keep it for that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Santosh, Dr. Rashmin, and all the others, and office bearers of AAOS for this particular opportunity. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed this session with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. KP.